Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. Episode of MSP 1337. It has been asked on more than one occasion to give some direction on AI. So this week I have Alane Boyd from Biggest Goal to talk about some of the misconceptions around AI, maybe some of the ways in which we should be using AI to our advantage. And so with that, Alane, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. I'm excited about diving into some AI security topics.
So let's start with the easy one out of the gate. You hear this a lot, predominantly in the employee space or consumer space of I used fill in the blank GPT tool to enhance my productivity or to answer a question. I mean, we're seeing now where I think it's Claude has been incorporated into several medical systems as a way to help better coding and some of the other stuff. So good, better, otherwise, but we're seeing sort of the diversification of the ways in which we're leveraging these tools. But back to the consumer part, I guess that's where I want to start. And I know you and I've talked about this before. What's the word of caution when it comes to using tools like that are, out of the box, in many cases free?
Yeah, I mean, when you were talking about like these medical companies or insurance companies having a partnership with something like Claude, they have a special relationship where we're talking about personal identifiable information being protected. So
Sure.
when we're just, like you said, like off the shelf, most companies are not doing these huge user agreements with Claude or Anthropic. We're using what's available to us.
Sure.
And that would be, by default, Claude is a great example. By default, it is feeding your data that you're putting in there, your prompts, whatever information you're uploading, it's feeding it back to the AI to train that data that's available. So
Sure.
if you're not looking at that, and that same thing in ChatGPT, most of these are that way. If you're using a free version, most of the time you don't have the option to turn that off.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting, if you think about some of the other products that we all have consumed over the years that are free, maybe it's Google Workspace, or maybe you have a Yahoo Mail account or something that you probably have had for, in some cases, decades.
Mm-hmm.
But now those companies are incorporating services like, Gemini or some of the others that changes, I didn't really care if someone was like scraping my generic Gmail account, because I just used it for things like subscribing to, or, because I didn't want it to get caught in my work stuff. And actually they have pretty good filters. Surprisingly, they actually, a lot of the junk, garbage, malware type stuff is getting filtered. They don't want to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
But now you add in things like AI tools on a already free platform consumption. How do you approach that? Because I think there's still value in taking advantage of it, but I think the hairs on the back of your neck tend to be, the spidey senses should be kicking in when you leverage those tools.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I was thinking about when you're talking about the free really isn't free, and thinking about the App Store, and there were free games.
Oh,
And, that was the first thing that came to mind. It's like they're taking your data and selling it. And
sure.
so, one of the things is, have a company AI use policy to back you up if something happens. Then you have something to say, this employee agreed to this being our AI usage policy. They didn't go along with it. But if you don't have that, you don't have a leg to stand on if anything ever got escalated. The
Sure.
other thing is looking at a paid account, looking at, having an enterprise level account, giving those employees access. They are going to use it whether or not you give them access. So
Yeah.
starting to talk about what your company policy is, which ones do you want your employees to use, and making a conversation about it instead of ignoring it. And then the last thing would be looking at AI agents that were
Sure.
already doing the workflow, and so that the employee doesn't feel like they need to go and use AI. AI is already
The
being used on
purpose
behalf.
built.
Yes.
So before we get into the different types, you bring up one with agents, and there's bots, and the list goes on and on and on. What are your thoughts on? Well, I got two, but what are your thoughts on leveraging offline AI tools? Like, part of me is all in, and I've played around with them on machines that are not affiliated with anything, but obviously the IP address that it's coming from is hard to say, oh, well, we see this over here, it's the same person. But with that, it's free. I'm using a tool offline and I'm not paying for the tokens, that kind of thing. Do we need to have the same level of concern that just because it's offline, or we've downloaded the model, that we aren't still feeding back to the mothership?
I mean, I always use caution for things like that. I mean, there's some that you can download onto your computer and use those, like you're saying, offline. Now, everything is connected. And if
Sure.
it is a free version, you really need to be looking at those terms and conditions on what is really free to you, because
Yeah.
just because it's offline, your computer is still connected to the internet. The other thing is, I have a MacBook Pro. I disconnected Siri from my computer because I don't want it reading and listening to things. So you have other apps that are working in the background that could be reading those things.
Well, that leads me to my next question. Apple just announced their reliance on, was it Gemini, the Google's AI tool to enhance Siri's intelligence. And I thought, on my phone, I have a very limited level of control of on or off. I mean, Siri's pretty baked into the functionality of your phone. You want to use maps, you want to tell your phone to play a song in an app that's on your device. It's leveraging Siri, it's leveraging the internet. Um, I guess this goes back to your word of caution.
Yeah, and what you just said, that Apple is partnering with Google. In any other way, they are competitors. But that
Right.
because AI is there's only so many people that can even develop an AI. So the pool is so small that these companies are partnering with each other. Anthropic, who owns Claude, they just got a huge, huge fundraising from Amazon. Is,
Sure.
and then Copa or Microsoft owns, I think, half or close to half of OpenAI, who owns
Yeah.
ChatGPT. They are all intertwined, sharing data between each other because it's moving so fast and you can't develop solo on your own and keep up with the other companies. They're all
Sure.
combining in the background.
Yeah, and I think China just announced that they have a major update that's coming for DeepSeek. So everybody's, ooh, what's it gonna be? What's it gonna be? The other one that I was curious about. So I've been reading about apps that are out there that are heavily designed around AI functionality. AI is essentially, for lack of a better word, it is a workflow or a model. And I think this will be a good segue into talking about the different types of AI usage, or how AI models are built. It was interesting because it was a list of truly open source products that weren't freemium. They were being touted as open source and offline. Like, you can download this product and it functions completely offline. And then it says for one user. And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
well, what do you mean? If I downloaded a truly open source product, I'm now buying licenses to add user number two. So how much are they still able to then see or extrapolate from this quote open source free accessible model, when you can't use it for much more than, say, self learning or better understanding of the tool itself?
I mean, I've seen this, gosh, they try to control that with open source stuff. I owned a technology company before this that I built up and sold, and I had two SaaS products, and we were working with review technology and all kinds of stuff. And, this isn't something new that just came along because
Sure.
AI was available. And so, sometimes some of the partners that we were working with, they just went against the terms and conditions of that site and just waited for something to happen. I don't know that that's always the best plan, but a lot of
Sure.
times they don't have a way to really track that. They can track by VPN, but are they really? And looking at it that way. But I mean, that
Am
is
I
a
important
concern.
enough for them?
Yeah, yeah. Some of those, they're just looking for enough users to raise their next round or something like that. So they're not really going after companies that are doing it. So,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that anybody should, but I know that I've seen it happen.
Okay. So that's so segueing into you know chatbots, agents, a full LLM model or models being used together or in separate, you know, workflows. Can you just kind of give a high level overview of sort of what the different pieces are? Because I think there's a lot of confusion out there on, oh yeah, I use ChatGPT, which I guess I just gave another example,
Right.
because they're not all the same. I think you and I have talked about before of like comparing models side by side, putting the same prompt into each one,
Mhm.
especially when you look at it in the raw format before it gets made pretty so that the consumer can say, oh, this is ready for publishing. They even got my logo right. Those are really, that's like the first identifier, right, where you can see clearly that they are not the same.
Right.
And they try very hard to create the illusion that, regardless of which one you used, is going to create sort of that canned formatting that makes it look like you created it to some degree, except the colons and hashes tend to make it unbelievable. Um, yeah, I guess just talk us through some of that, because I think this would really help, particularly at the user level, what it means to consume AI tools and resources.
Yeah. So when we're like, I'll use ChatGPT as just the word to use here, but really anything
Sure.
that you're going and writing a prompt, that would be your most elementary usage of AI. You're going, it's a little assistant for you, but think of it this way. Anybody that's using it, it is a one-on-one relationship. You're going and writing the prompt. AI is just spitting out what you should go do. It's not doing anything more than that. So it's helping you, but it's not doing any work for you. And it depends, like you said, on which model or which engine you're using, like Claude versus ChatGPT versus Perplexity or the other hundreds that are out there. So that would be prompting and writing. The next piece that I would say would be the next stage is you're looking at creating your own custom GPTs in ChatGPT or your gems in Gemini or your projects in Claude, where it is using some of the data that you fed it to have a certain output. So it's got some knowledge that you've trained it on, and when you prompt, it goes back to it.
So purpose built and limiting its sort of the tentacles of being able to just go and pull data from anywhere because you don't need it to do that. So you're also using very few tokens then in that case, because you're getting very specific around sort of parameters that you're allowed to put in the first place, or
Yeah,
that
and,
it
and
would respond to.
Yeah, and if you think about AI as a brain in this, AI is giving your chat interaction a brain to be able to read through your training data that you fed it and then spit something out back to you.
Which by and large, most people using the prompt based approach are in many cases, in fact, in most cases, from what I'm seeing, myself included, we're not doing it well. We're just crossing our fingers that we'll get output based on our, scrambled gibberish that we throw at it, and we don't double down on repetition. And oftentimes, our context comes after the question, which is what I was notorious for. I'd ask a question and then try to give context. And I guess the research shows that make sure that you give it context, then ask the question,
Yes.
because now it has context to apply as you're writing the question. I'm like, huh. So I've been testing that theory. It even goes so far as to say, like, use like coding terms in your prompt, use the brackets and type things like context, because then it knows that it's not supposed to use that particular word in the output that it's giving you.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned context here because when we're chatting with ChatGPT or even using custom GPTs, that context window that it has even access to, even if you've fed it information, it can only absorb so many tokens
Right.
and your output, so it can only take so many in and it can only produce so many, which so For an
And for
example,
clarity, when you say tokens, real quick, and I might even not quite have this, a token is a character, correct?
it could be a word.
Oh, it could be an entire word.
It could be, yeah. So we try to just simplify it in that. And your free version versus your paid version give you access to different amount of tokens. And when we talk about agents in a minute, when we're using the APIs directly, we get more tokens if we're talking with the API directly.
Well, this reminds me of like when you post on LinkedIn or you do an X, formerly Twitter, whatever it's called today. Like 120 characters. It's not that. It's more of word volume, not number of characters string allowed in the box.
Typically, I mean, give or take, a few things
Sure.
here, but that's just a really easy way to kind of understand, the amount of information you're feeding it. Like if you think of a huge document and you put a window on it, that is all that it's going to see is that window because it cannot absorb all that information and give
Right.
you an output as well. So that's something that we have to consider and why doing a custom GPT can be very helpful with context and tokens because it's not using all of AI to go figure out this general response. It's coming back to, okay, this is the data that I have to work with and I can do a very specific output for them.
So I'm a Copilot user. That's one of the approved in our organization. And one of the things I've been using a little bit is starting to play around with like notebooks and
Mhm.
Copilot Studio. So to your point, like I noticed that when I'm just using, if I want to create an agent or a notebook inside of my Copilot environment, I'm limited to the amount of documents I can give it. I think it's limited to like 20 documents, which is funny because it doesn't say how big is the document. It just says the number of file limitation. I have broken that with the appropriate number of files by having files in that 20 that are way too big for
Yeah, it's
what
a
it can handle.
150-page
Yeah.
document.
Yes. It does not like that.
It could probably get pretty overwhelmed. So where we can also bridge this, because that's such a good example, is like, well, how do you make an AI friendly database using Copilot and something called RAG? And I can't remember
Sure.
the regenerative augmented generation or something like that. I always get it confused, but where you have an AI friendly database in SharePoint with all of your documents and then having Copilot access those documents.
I always think of RAG, and I don't think I'd get the acronym right either, but it's essentially a controlled environment. It's limiting scope to what we plug in. So because of the RAG, it's like bowling with bumpers, right? We're saying no, 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 don't go everywhere to try and get
Mhm.
me answers. Use solely this database.
Exactly. And it can be SharePoint, it can be Dropbox, it could be Google Drive that it has that an agent would have access to in a RAG database, which would just be Dropbox Drive or SharePoint, look up the information and then give you the answer.
Retrieval augmented generation.
There you go. Thank you. I should have put it
The
on my
key
screen
the
because
key
I
word,
forget
the
to
only
do
word we really care about is the first part, right? We are saying to retrieve from.
it. But I always that's what I mess up the most. But
Right, right,
exactly,
right.
it's retrieving information is exactly what it's doing. So your example, like with using something like Notebook LM or something where you can feed it information, same thing can be done similarly with a custom GPT. And I see this so often, like in IT is, okay, you can have documentation around like I call them a solutioner is what I call it, but it's basically okay, what is our access points for this department? How do we have this mapped for them? And you can have a custom, it's almost like your personal assistant on like, how did we solution this before? And it could give you the answer immediately. So I see a lot of clients create custom GPTs for
Sure,
each department, or if it's an agency or something where they've got custom GPTs for each client.
sure. I've seen it used for vendor retrieval validation. So it will go out and identify, like if I said I want to use, CrowdStrike or Bitdefender or whatever it is, it goes out and identifies things like, does it have MFA? How long have they been in business? And you're capturing information that, by and large, is like if it was analog, it would be the cliff notes of a novel.
Yeah, yeah, it would. So let's go ahead then, because we've kind of been dabbling about RAG
Yeah.
and AI agents. So AI agents would be your next evolution of how to use AI. AI agents are like a little autonomous digital workers on your team that are waiting for a trigger to happen so it can do its
Sure.
job. So the trigger could be you having your own chat with this AI agent. So that could be the trigger where you're asking it a question. It could be on a schedule every day at 12 a.m. Run this report for me and send me a Teams note on the hours put into this client. Or it could be a form is filled out. So it has some kind of trigger. The AI agent has the prompt already built into it. So it already knows how to do the job. And when we talk about tokens, it's got a lot more tokens that it can work with because we're using the APIs to work with the AIs. And then we tell it what we want the output to be. The output could be sending a Teams message. The output could be putting in a document together. It could
Sure.
have so many pieces of what it needs to do built into it.
So for an average user, it makes me think about things like Zapier or Power Automate, where I go, I have this desired outcome, and it's somewhat WYSIWYG. I don't have to be a programmer, but I'm creating either I push a button trigger, or because of an event has occurred, it's automating a trigger. So I liken it to, I actually set this up recently. I created a form to basically say, I want to be a part of your reoccurring meeting that happens every month, as opposed to me sending you an invite to invite you to the meeting because I just found out just now and I have to now forward it to you manually. I basically have a form that you just go put your name and your email address in, and my Outlook will automatically send you to add you to the reoccurring calendar. Would that be a characterization then of that? Then if that's the case, AI agents have been around for a very long time.
So it's what you're saying is the first step of an AI
Sure.
agent. So when I started my company, AI agents weren't available, and we would build stuff for companies in make.com and Zapier.
Sure.
And so the difference between an AI agent is that it is more autonomous and you don't have to have every single thing spelled out. The agent can think on its own and produce a lot more than what a simple automation. Now, when you look at it, we use N8N to build agents in. It looks very similar to a make scenario because you've got different nodes all connected, but the difference is you have this AI agent. Now, Zapier and Make have launched AI agents within those tools to build out, but it is very cumbersome because they weren't built that way originally. Something like N8N was built specifically for using AI agents.
Right.
And then you can plug in something like RAG and have that AI agent access the RAG database, then pull out the information. Where before, there was just no way for that much information to be found in one time.
So a better example would be something to the likes of like maybe using Lovable, still thinking about more of the consumer side a little bit, just to kind of help people visualize this, is that I take advantage of Lovable or some of the others and I say, this is my company brand, this is our mission statement, and this is our logo, and we provide services in the following areas, build me a website.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have and do it.
Do it.
Doesn't say it's secure, but like it has created the fundamentals of what used to create a web developer who wasn't necessarily working with templates. And even then, what would take hours to build is being done in seconds, if not a few minutes.
Exactly. And that's a great example of a closed AI agent system. Like basically that's what this tool has inside of it. And then if you think, okay, well, how could I seamlessly create this? Well, I could have anybody on my team submit a form with what logo do you want? What colors do you need? Whatever. Then that AI agent sees that come through and we use Lovable's API to create the landing page and then submit a ticket to the marketing team to review before it goes live.
Yeah. I like it. All right. So we've covered ChatGPT essentially, or the GPTs. We've talked about more of containerized GPTs where we've really narrowed the scope. We've talked about agents. I don't know how many others there are, but one that we haven't talked about is bots.
Where they're going, are you thinking of bots as like they're going in and scraping and pulling information together?
No, 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 not thinking of like the web bots of the GeoCities days where they went and scraped every website so they could present it in a searchable format. I'm thinking of like the chat bots that are AI built, where I go to a website and I am now talking to the illusion of a real person.
So most of those are an AI agent with an interface that is just a chat interface.
Got it.
So something like that is like it's got a chat interface. So a fun example of this. So N8N has these really ugly versions of chat interfaces. It's what's default. You can kind of make some customizations in there. But we use Lovable to make a pretty chat interface. And we hook that up to our AI agent in N8N who has access to a RAG database. That way, when you chat on somebody's website, it looks pretty and it has all of the support information accessible to it. So we have a client of ours, they had 4 support people, human beings, handling their website online chat coming in for support. We hooked that up to we took their knowledge base, we hooked it up to a RAG database, created an AI agent, chat bot, and now they have one part-time person that just reviews that the information is correct.
So, in kind of a full circle, obviously this our audience is largely the MSP community, and they're dealing with client demand of like, I need AI, and really the conversation is, what outcomes do you desire? And I think you just kind of touched on it a little bit. It's not about necessarily what AI tools are approved or not approved in a corporate environment. I mean, that's part of it, but what the reality is, what are you needing the AI to do? What outcomes do you expect it to have? And I think to what you just said, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think to a large degree, a lot of organizations are going about this the wrong way. They believe that once I give you the tool, you will go and create and be an added productive member of our ecosystem. And heaven forbid we taught you how to use this tool. Is that really where we're at? Like we've been really just driving like, hey, everybody needs this, and just kind of throwing it out like we're throwing candy in a parade. And the reality is no one's asking for candy. They just think it's cool that there's a parade and they got 2 hours of their day to not do anything. And oh, look, there goes another tractor or fire truck. How do we change that mindset? Because I think that in the MSP space, we're probably our own worst enemy. We want to automate everything because automation does reduce the human element of doing things, making mistakes. But that's not the same thing as providing guidance to our clients that probably have a need for something that is driven by an AI tool. What does that look like? And I think that's where we are today.
I mean, I think you nailed it. I think it was Ford that said this, and I apologize if I get the person wrong, but he says if we would have asked what people wanted, they would have
Yeah,
said faster horses, and I
that
was
is
building
Henry
a
Ford.
vehicle. Yeah, okay, yep.
Yes.
So that is exactly where we're at. They're asking for these tools because they are suffering from way too much workload. Everything needs
Sure.
to be faster, more accurate, and we've got a backlog of things. Everybody has a backlog of things a mile long that they never get to. So they're asking for these AI chats like ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever so they can do their job faster and easier. But what they really could be doing if the company looked at it from a higher level is, okay, how do we just make people's jobs faster and easier using AI and looking at AI agents? I have been teaching companies how to use AI. This is my 4th year doing this. And last week, I did an AI leadership workshop with people that didn't even understand how to write a prompt correctly. So going from that level, and this is not uncommon. This is very, very normal to go into companies doing this. So I do a bridge where we're talking about agents and you can see the light bulbs go off. It's like, oh my gosh, like they didn't even know this was possible. There's a lack of knowledge around what AI agents are, how they can consume workload for companies. And so really the question is, okay, we know the pain points. Our employees know the pain points. We do a priority impact review with clients all the time. Where are your employees the most affected by workload? Let's pick those 3 and then let's automate that with an AI agent.
Yeah. So in the little bit of time that we have left, I'd love your thoughts on this. Is I've kind of seen some things that I think are, super powerful. One of them that we talked about was the prompt and it being sort of like one-on-one, like you having access to Copilot prompt and me having it are going to be two different experiences, even if sometimes we ask the same questions, right? Because
Mhm.
the data that Copilot's looking at for you is going to be different, especially at the OneDrive level and Outlook level than mine. If it does give the same answer, we may have a problem. Um, but where I saw some interesting stuff is like tools like I think it was called Recall. I don't remember if it was Recall.ai, but it was Recall was the app, and as I was reading through it, it was talking about like the one-to-one like we just described. But then like the highest tier account was like it called it corporate learning. So like as we are talking to this AI and we're capturing information and we're sharing documents and we're creating a knowledge base, that is all being sort of pooled to make the next person's question that happened to be my question to get those same results. And I think we're seeing some of that with like Slack and Teams, where they have access to an AI that is meant to be shared. And I'm
Mhm.
just curious, are you seeing that as well, or and is that like how to get people really started with recognizing like there is AI value out of the gate right now, to your point of reducing the task or to do overload, because a lot of times the stuff that we're being asked to do is like that meeting we had 3 months ago. We had 4 action items. Do you remember what they were? No, I do not. I also don't remember what I wore, what I had for lunch, or how many people we had in the organization at that point in time. But I believe we have more now.
I mean, absolutely. Gosh, there's like a lot to unpack on that. But
Sure.
one of the biggest things is it's a paid account. There is
Yeah.
corporate learning available on a paid account. Every single system is starting to do this. I mean, we use ClickUp internally. They already have AI agents and they call it the brain, an AI brain that's within it. And they just purchased another AI company to make it even more powerful. So, they're trying to make things more seamless for the employees, but it is not enough if that's all you're thinking about is
Sure.
prompting. Like that is like the one thing I want to drive home with people is prompting is so basic and you're going to be limited in the output that you get if you're not thinking about it from like your example with the meeting notes. You already have AI transcribing your meeting, have an agent watching for that meeting, pulling out the action items, going to your project
Sure.
management system, creating the tasks and assigning it to the right people in the correct project that it needs to be in. So like
In
a
real
lot of our
time.
time is tedious. Like that is exactly like what you mentioned. Most of our time is doing tedious stuff.
Reactive too, right? We're doing it
Mhm.
reactive, right? Like so I think about like when we think about transcribing a meeting, this isn't about transcribing it tomorrow or in 2 weeks. It's that when the meeting's over, I have the action items right there in front of me.
Exactly. I mean, if this one pops into my head too, but it may not be your audience. But if any of the MSPs or owners in here and they create proposals for their clients, you have a sales call with a transcript that goes into your CRM, populates, you move it to proposal stage, and it
Sure.
creates the proposal for you with their words and your services in there. Like we're talking
Yeah.
hours of work saved that nobody wants to do.
Tickets is another one I think is pretty interesting of like it's one thing to have a transcription convert a voicemail into a ticket in your PSA. But what about the emotional element that AI can detect in that same call of like the ticket was just a normal ticket, but because of the emotional gauge that was given, it said, no, I'm making this an emergency ticket. This needs to be addressed immediately. It's changing how we have the opportunity to do business more effectively and efficiently.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness, so many things here. I'm gonna have to go sign up for some new AI tools today. I think that's on my agenda. If my internal IT department's listening, you should ignore that. It was just a haha. Alane, as we have run out of time, I have one question, and then I want you to tell us where people can find you.
Okay.
Whether it was last year, 2025, or as we've already now had more than a week to do this, what's one book that you have read in the last year that you find worthy of sharing with others? It can be fiction or nonfiction, it can be business, or it can be, there's no category criteria.
So this is going to be so opposite of everything we just talked about. It is a book
Perfect.
called Anxious Generation, and it's
Okay.
about getting off of technology. It's primarily for kids, but um, I think adults need to hear it too. Like we are inundated with technology and our brains need a break.
Yeah, you bring up something really interesting. We could do a whole nother podcast is to think about kids that have been born into using technology. And I believe is it 2030 will be the first generation of kids that grew up leveraging AI.
It's so believable, and the mental health statistics are just so depressing. And it's very clear in 2010 when the iPhone came out with the App Store that teen
Yeah,
mental illness and adult mental illness just plummeted because it was the
for
first
sure.
time that we had fully accessible social media and internet completely in a beautiful format versus our flip phones where we're like,
Right.
thumbing 800 times to send a text. But anyway, that one, for owning a tech company, I also see the the other side of we need to be outside, we need to be off
Yeah.
tech. And so a lot of my day is like, hey, let's get through this workday so we can do stuff that really matters, being with community, being with people,
Yeah.
spending time with our family, and being, going for a walk or something like that.
You're saying we shouldn't have to get our vitamin D through a pill?
I would hope not, but it happens. So
That's
I
right.
try to really balance it.
Alane, how can people get a hold of you?
Me personally, I'm very active on LinkedIn. So Alane Boyd, shoot me a note. I love connecting with people. And then my website is biggestgoal.ai.
All right. Well, for those of you listening, this has been an episode of MSP 1337. Thanks and have a great week.